Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is Divya Parekh. Divya is a leadership and branding coach and works with corporate leaders, achievers, and entrepreneurs looking for profound and quantitative tools to catalyze change in their spheres of influence. Divya wears many hats, including being the CEO of the DP Group. She is a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. She is a faculty member for the International Coach Academy. She's an executive and business and leadership instructor and trainer at North Carolina State University. She's a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Media and an opinion columnist for CEOWORLD magazine. And she also has numerous books to her credit. And I'm looking forward to touching on some of those. But, I find the best thing to do, let's get right into a conversation with our guest. So Divya, welcome to the Success Insight podcast.
Howard, thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
So I have to say, and I wasn't kidding here, you're wearing many hats these days. I'd love if you could, just to create a little context for our listening audience, a little bit about your background and how did you get into working with leaders around their coaching and their messaging, and especially in this day and age. I mean, there's so much noise out there, and how do we as leaders and professionals kind of rise above that to become influencers and kind of amplifiers of our message? So I'd love to get started with you on that.
Great question, Howard. So while I was in biochemistry and as I was doing neuroscience leadership, which is totally far away from any entrepreneurship, pure core science. And as I was in the process of growing a young family, I decided to grow my career horizontally and laterally rather than vertically. And as a result of that, I was able to learn multiple things. And in one of my previous lives, I've been in the research labs in universities, teaching students. And one thing that I found was connecting with people. And to me, people have been very much so fascinating in the sense that I was always curious, how do our bodies work? Because for me, human mind is the most complex machinery on the face of the earth. And no matter what AI comes through, this has evolved naturally and it happens and so nimble and so adaptive. So that was one of the reasons I went into biochemistry, to learn what is the chemistry behind emotions, chemistry of brain, what fires, what makes us work. And just the potential. It is amazing that here you have somebody. For example, I would love to share a story of one of my students. Came from a family background where they did not have much money, first generation in university, very proud and eager to learn and eager to work, eager to do what it takes. And when the student came in, had really poor grades from high school, got in college on athletic scholarship. And it was in one of the classes that I was teaching, and from back then, I wasn't a coach back then. And yet, because I cared for people, and I would say that, earning your own grades and earning through your own hard work and putting in your creativity into it, the fulfillment that comes through it is just phenomenal. And I was sharing one of my stories, how I had achieved something during my college years. That must have stuck with this gentleman. And then he came to me and we talked after class, and he said that I don't have a whole lot going on to my family and to this, but I really want to learn. And I was teaching biochemistry and I really find this topic really hard. And I said, show up during my office hours. I'm happy to help you. And he would show up without fail. And as it happened, I used to love helping people even back then, and just helped in my own natural way, not as I was trained. So my guess is I was coaching to some extent, somehow, unknowingly. And this gentleman came through with flying colors and went on Dean's List for that year. And even as he graduated, was on Dean's List. Just phenomenal. Just that transformation was what that drove me through my life. And here I was, moving through the biopharmaceuticals, through different careers, running multi-million-dollar projects. And the core message or the key thing is that when you care for people, I would connect for people working in the trenches to people in the C-suite. People would share their problems with me, and without realizing, it was just about relationship building. And yeah, I'm just kind of saying it's not just, it's about relationship building. It's about caring for people as to who they are and how you are supporting them. And then when I moved into entrepreneurship, what I found was that I could get things done that nobody else could get things done in that tough environment. People would have the work piled on the desk, totally busy. And I would show up on the desk and say, this is what's going on and the work needs to be done. And of course, they were part of the team. They were supposed to do the work, but the work would get done. This just did not happen on its own. There would be sometimes, we would be doing as a team lead, you are there, science doesn't stop. It runs morning, night, weekend. And if I was there, and if I knew that I could help the other person out where they didn't have to come, just kind of check and let them know that how things were going or something like that. And I would offer that without any strings attached. So it was about leading with value that I built relationships. And when I transitioned into entrepreneurship, I continued with that. And what I found was that very fast, I was being recognized as a media influencer. And as I started looking at things, it was that what is the message? What is the impact that each and every one of us wants to create? And of course, I invested in myself working with world-class coaches. And what I realized is that your message is the core. Your message is what makes people realize that, yeah, this is the person I want to work with, or this is the person, what does a person stand for? So that's where it is critical. So branding is not just about creating your brand color, your logo, your website. It's about what significance you are creating in other people's lives.
Yeah, it's how you make them feel.
Yeah, how you make them feel. And it's also about it's that significance.
Right.
What is the significance you're creating in other people's lives that they feel fulfilled and that they're able to unleash their potential?
Something dawns on me as you are kind of presenting and kind of laying out the breadcrumbs of your career, and that you started in the biochemistry field, as your entree. And what dawns on me is, as you kind of describe some of the key milestones as you have developed your career, every time you had an interaction, and that it's not just how you made them feel, but I also suspect from a neuroscience biochemical perspective, there is a chemical reaction taking place for the individual and for yourself, perhaps, when you are in contact with them and communicating with them. And again, this is where my knowledge probably has a full stop, but it seems to me, and I'm thinking, there are chemical reactions that go on in our bodies all the time. For when, like today or yesterday, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. And so my body is feeling a lot of sadness right now. Though now coming onto this call with you and knowing what a phenomenal entrepreneur and a wonderful background you have, this is going to really be a great podcast. It's going to have a really great interview. There's chemical reactions going on right now for me, perhaps even for you. And I suspect, kind of to bottom line this, is that there were chemical reactions coming on to the people who you were responsible for so they would be able to get the work done. And am I on target here, or is it just your effervescence and your caring? What else is going on here?
It's a two-way street, Howard. I always say that, relationship does not work one way. When you open your heart to people, people will open their hearts to you. And to me, there's nothing more powerful than that analogy of shaking hands. You cannot shake hands. You can wave in the air by yourself. You can say hello, that queen wave or king's wave, you are able to do that. But when you are shaking hands with someone, of course, folks, just now don't go and shake hands. The analogy is to just illustrate that an interaction happens when two people are engaged. So the key is to foster that positive relationship. The first is that caring, genuine caring for others. And if you're not, no matter how good of branding you have, that deep connection will not happen. And yeah, there are a lot of people you can definitely provide services on surface. Yet what I'm seeking for me in my life, I am seeking transformation in other people's lives. I'm not fulfilled unless that transformation happens. And does it happen every single time? No, it doesn't. Because you gotta be practical about it. But do I aim for it? Yes, I aim for it every single time. Because here's also a thing. As an entrepreneur, you gotta know that not everybody's ready to receive that. And that again, in the branding or positioning, I call it positioning, which is very essential, that your positioning should be such, your branding should be such that you're repelling people that you don't want to work with. You're repelling those who are not ready to receive your message. You are ready to transform other people's lives.
And the types of clients that you would work with, I mean, are you, in the introduction, we talked about leaders, CEOs, corporate, maybe super achievers, super entrepreneurs. Who would be your ideal clients that you would be pursuing? We bring about, I want to work with corporate leaders, CEOs, et cetera. I mean, how did you decide where your niche was going to lie?
Great question. So here's the first of the things is knowing about your own values. That's what I share. I mean, this is for me, and it has worked with thousands of clients that I've worked with. Knowing your values. What is your core values that drives your decision day in and day out? That makes you stand in your shoes. That makes you show up day in and day out. So, for example, my core values is that I want to work with somebody who cares for people, who wants to make an impact, who wants to create that influence, who wants to have a quality lifestyle that they deserve, who is hungry to make an impact. And at the same time, they're hungry to increase their bottom line as well. Because here's the thing. You could help a whole lot more people if you are financially secure. Because then all those chemical reactions, and we were talking about release of hormones, and basically what happens is that when there's a trigger, right? Something happens outside. And then within microseconds, there's a release of chemicals and it creates emotions, which is usually 6 seconds. We're not going to go into the details. But now when that is happening, if you are not, as they say, you got to put on the oxygen mask yourself. If you're not yourself secure, whether it's in mindset, whether it's in heart set, action set, skill set, then how are you going to help others? So it's a mix of it, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're an author, aspiring author, leader, corporate professional, the key is that you're hungry. You're hungry, first of all, to help others. Then you're hungry to help yourself and up-level yourself. Because to me, life is not just about increasing dollars, or life is not just about moving into the next position, or life is not just about launching another product. Life is about that joy and passion and bringing that impact to people, because when that is there, you achieve results. And when you see transformation, money is the byproduct. Now, as you will realize in my books or in my conversation with you, Howard, I'm not going to talk about money, because money comes, money follows if you have the right intention and achieve transformation in your results.
Very much so. Very much so. And, speaking of your books, I'm curious. I mean, you're a prolific author. I mean, you've got the Art of Unlearning series. You've got the Entrepreneur's Guide, Unlock Your Future. How did you get into the writing space? I mean, what did you wake up one day and said, hey, I want to write a book? Or, so how did that come about?
So when I was a kid, I used to write short stories and even I'd be sitting in my tree. I had a favorite tree in my backyard, and I'd climb up there and I'd just kind of look around, and I could see leprechauns jumping from one branch to another, or like dragons swooping down. And I was very imaginative and creative. So I used to write stories. I don't know how good they were or not, and poems too. And then as I moved into science, of course, that gets left behind. And then I went into a lot of technical writing, because when you are, whether you're submitting reports or whether you're doing presentations, writing is involved wherever you are at. So I had a process, and, usually I could write up, and even though it was kind of cut and dry interpretation and all that, yet there was a lot of writing involved. And now, as I moved into entrepreneurship, I was going through a transition plan. So while I was at work, while I was working, I started helping people. So I was just kind of doing pro bono coaching. And as I was doing pro bono coaching, my leadership was recognized. And when it was recognized, I was invited by one of the independent publishers to come join them and write a chapter. And I said, oh, yeah, it's a chapter, around like 2,000, 3,000 words. That's a piece of cake. And I went in there and, oh my goodness, I just could not bring myself to be happy with what I had written. I would write something and print it, throw it away. I started writing in the notebook, didn't work. Then I started writing on the computer. Nothing worked. And then coming from science background, I was like, I'm not going to give up on this. I'm going to go connect with world-class coaches who teach writing. And of course, I had taken creative writing in my good old days and all that stuff. And as I started learning, I finally realized that I was standing in my own way. It was that mental block. And once that was gone, I was able to write my chapter, and publisher was good with it, and we published it. And after that was done, then I had so much experience, because as I had mentioned earlier, I had traveled in my career laterally. And when you do that, you acquire a ton of experience. And then one of the stories I want to share is that during my first coaching class, one of my instructors, it was a full day of coaching class that day. And one of my instructors mentioned, you guys are here to train as coaches. One thing I want to tell you guys is that, remember, learning does not stop. Once you get your certification, learning continues. And she shared that she had her own coaches. And I was like, okay, I need coaches. Right after the class, I reached out to her. She became my coach, and I had somebody else too. And then as I was talking, so one of my coaches mentioned that, hey, Divya, you have got so much knowledge, and have you thought about capturing that in additional books? I'm like, that's a good idea. So I wrote another book, because what had happened during that process, when I'd been learning from other world-class masters, I relaxed. And when I relaxed, and when that belief in myself kind of came back, I knew I had a lot to offer. And then I started writing. I wrote one book, then I wrote second book, then third book. And then people started asking me, oh, how did you get to start writing the book? I'm like, I'm just writing. And then one of the days I was sitting with my coach, and I was sharing the conversation with him. And he said that, okay, how do you write? Share with me. And I was just sharing with him and said, oh, looks like you have a process, how you go about it. And which is pretty interesting that you use the same process, but you're applying it, you're customizing it when you're writing about different topics. So I'm like, So that's when the things evolved. And it's not that I don't get writer's blocks, or I don't get that monstrous fear raising its ugly head in my head. It still happens, but it's about learning how to cope with it and how to getting over it and continuing on your journey.
Very interesting. There's so many models out there about writing books, and the ones, and I will admit, in the spirit of full disclosure, when I wrote my book, it was via a program which was, become a best-selling author on Amazon. It's like, okay, fine. It was the writing of the book was difficult for me in some ways, though. What I ended up doing is using my interviews from at the time, it was a Facebook Live show. And I would take those interviews and they became the chapters of my book. But I digress. It was hard. Whereas this process we're going through right now today, you and I are having a conversation, and your passion, my passion just freely flows out. Right now it's still in the ether. It's an audio file, but it could just as easily help take the shape of a book. I would like to ask two questions related to book writing. One, of the books that you have written, and I know a book is like your own child.
You said it.
But is there a favorite book or a favorite story in one of those books that you are still the most proud of?
Oh my goodness. Now that's asking which child is my favorite.
Which child is your favorite? Okay, let's ask that.
How about this? I'll say I've got all the kids are my favorite, but I'm going to share what stands out in one of the books, or I'll mention a couple of books. So one of the books, The Entrepreneur's Garden, that I wrote a couple of years back, I wrote that of myself being somewhere 30 years down the road, what kind of life I would have. And I gave the character name Dee and how she mentors a young entrepreneur and has her walk down through her business and helps her become successful. And what's interesting is that a reader who picked up a book through someone that I knew, and that person was reading book, and they have been doing the masterminding with the Entrepreneur's Garden for past 3 years. And recently, Nancy and I touched base. I love to stay in touch with my readers and see if my books have helped them. And she said that she's in bookkeeping business, and to her credit, I was just amazed how she had the results down to the percent. She said, yeah, my business increased 44% as a result of your book. So that's one of the stories I'm really, really grateful for. And then one of the other stories from my recent book, Expert to Influencer. This goes back to my coaching days when I used to be coaching / mentoring robotics team. And these were high schoolers. They had started out a nonprofit organization that was providing mentoring for robotics and students who did not have the means for the robotics team fees and all that. So they were just offering that for free. And it was just fascinating. So the first year I was there, I would have my computer with me while I'm doing entrepreneurship and guiding them, fully involved. I used to practically live in the workshop. Weekends, evenings, during the robotics competitions, just kind of being there, cheering them on. In the second year, I pulled back a little bit, going a little less because I was seeing these emerging leaders. And these are kids in high school, just taking it and running with it and providing mentorship here and there. And in the third year, my goodness, I cannot say how proud I am of them. They were just fast tracking. And what had happened is because of nonprofit, we got some grants. However, we were helping a lot of students. Most of the robotics teams may be charging students, I don't know, sometimes $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. They're all different ranges going on. However, our team wasn't charging our students that much. And we also had several students who couldn't afford to pay the fee. So we were covering there. So of course, the grants, we did not have all these automated tools and all these replacement parts that we could spend a ton of money. So our robot was good. It could participate in the competition and it fought valiantly, very courageously. But, it did not do as well as it could have if we had put in those more robust parts. And so, of course, we are sitting the regional competition. I think so it was state competition. We were done. And we knew that, we had lost. We were not going to get any technical awards or anything like that. And my team is cheering every time another team gets it. And I could see that they were cheering. But after the laps, as the teams ran down the pit, their faces, I could see their faces drooping. That, oh, you know what? We are almost to the end. Don't think so. We are getting any award. And it's not anything about the award. It's about the recognition. And here comes the announcement that our team got an award for emotional intelligence. You're talking 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. And emotional intelligence and leadership award. So that's how my book starts out, An Expert to Influencer. I know I gave the whole story away. You didn't have, but.
No, that's wonderful. I mean, it just, and again, I think as you've described your background and upbringing and how you developed your career and work with your team, I think that the element that is crossing from gatepost to gatepost is communication. It's caring about the workers, the team, the students, the clients that you are charged with or stepped up to work with. And that in itself, showing that caring, that engagement, it really kind of has that effect, that emotional chemical effect on us that we want to do our very best. And that award for emotional intelligence certainly communicated that as well.
Yeah, and the beauty of that was that year I had been totally I'd been part of the team, but they were the ones who were leading. And that's what the power is of being that amplifier and influencer. And today, now is the time where we cannot just sit, folks. If you are listening to this podcast, think about it. If each and every one of us donated even 1 hour to benefit somebody else. So even if 100 million people out of 300 plus million people in the US were to do that, you're talking 100 million hours every month. And what's there to stop for us taking our country back to the heights or to new heights? So today's the time to step into that arena and become the influencer you can be. It's not just about going and having large social media following, or it's not just about, as I discussed in Expert to Influencer, it's about doing something for your community. And it could be just doing for your own child, taking that time to listen to them, or doing something for that neighbor. Or, for example, the profits, some of the profits from my books go to entrepreneurs impacted with COVID-19. I'm not spending much time, and yet that's happening. And then I've connected with a group in Louisiana where today in the morning, I mentored youngsters, and you see their faces light up, and mentoring business owners. So it's just kind of taking that little bit of your time and helping somebody else.
There's a term that is used on a kind of consistent basis within our profession of how we show up. As coaches, as entrepreneurs, we show up for ourselves and for our clients, to our loved ones, to help support them in whatever it is they need support for. But the showing up and sharing that message and why it's so important. And I love this call to action. If all of us would just show up for 1 hour a day or a month, imagine the impact we can have. Because I think we are not in a good place in this country right now. It's just the perception is it's getting worse, but there's also the opportunity, and there still has to be hope that we can all make a difference and not only care about ourselves, but also care about our neighbor and the family down the street or the small business that is struggling. Divya, I'm curious, in your work, again, you've got a lot of hats on, especially with the Forbes organization, as a contributing writer on the Coaches Council, the Coach Academy, writing the opinion pieces. When you're not working, what do you do for yourself, to take care of yourself and your family and your loved ones? What are you doing?
I don't work because I love what I do.
Okay.
And I do what I love. So for me, I'm jazzed up most of the time, except for some administrative work. I will be honest. I do not like some of the administrative work, and I do farm out most of it. And yet there are some things that you have to do yourself. So But to add to okay, when I'm not interacting with clients or not doing those administrative tasks, I love communing with nature. I love meditating. I love listening to music. I love dancing. And I love singing when nobody's around.
Okay. That's what showers are for.
Yes. And I love mentoring because I'll tell you, there are so many people. So I just have conversations with, there are a lot of single moms. Then there are some parents who are really struggling right now because they're working and then they have their own kids, especially if it's the young ones. So I just want to share a very quick story. So one of the parents was struggling and I don't know how to do it. And I said, okay, give me the age of your kids. And they said, 10 and 5. So I said, what's there to stop from your 5-year-old and 10-year-old becoming emerging leaders? And the mom goes, what? I said, invite them to step into their leadership and step into their potential. Give them that pride that they can earn, that this is something I have earned. It's not just giving a certificate because you're there. Let them earn and sit down and see what is it that they want and let them earn that. And surprisingly, her 5-year-old and 10-year-old, they do the work. And once they have done the work while learning online, in the evening, they have earned whatever their system is. So it's not bribery. It's about, okay, you want to have this. So these are the points you're earning. And similarly, like if you go in you have a punch card in a store, you're doing that. And things have changed in their house. So that's, again, showing up as an influencer, right? So her older daughter is spending that 1 extra hour with her younger brother.
I love that. Just, empowering the children and to step up and become leaders and understand the value of earning. And at the same time, it gives the parent a little bit of a respite from having to be, available, 24/7 these days in our age of COVID. Divya, it's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you. And I would love if you could share with our listeners, if they would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
So 3 places where you can find me. One is my website, www.entrepreneur.divyaparekh.com. And you can contact me through my email, contact@divyaparekh.com. D as in David, I, B as in Victor, Y-A, P as in Paul, A as in Apple, R as in Robert, E, K as in Kevin, H as in Harry. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn. And one request I have is, if you have not had a chance, I guarantee you that you will find a ton of value in my books. Go grab a book and help an entrepreneur who's been impacted by COVID-19.
Fantastic. And, we'll definitely provide the links back to your website, entrepreneur.divyaparekh.com, as well as, provide the email address and links to LinkedIn. And we'll also have your author page on Amazon, so the readers or listeners can pick a book and continue on their journey. And really, again, in this age of COVID-19, this is a wonderful opportunity to still step up and become a greater influencer and amplifier of a message of taking care of the community and themselves, and really very important. So your books will be a great resource to them. Divya, before we head out today, is there any parting words, wisdom, we call it in our show an insight to go, that you would like to share with our listeners?
Absolutely. One thing that I would share is that, you have the best tool that any species has in this whole wide world. That's your brain. And brain can be trained at any age. So I would say that do not think that there are only leaders are born. No, leaders are made. You can be a leader. You can be an amplifier. You can be an influencer. You can be a magnifier. You can be a change agent, whatever you relate to. Go out there and up-level yourself to your next best version.
Fantastic. Divya, thank you so much again for joining us on the Success Insight podcast.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Divya Parekh. She is a leadership and branding coach, and really just a wonderful conversation on the ways that we can up-level ourselves and becoming greater influencers and amplifiers, and really the difference we can make not only for ourselves, our loved ones, but our community at large and the businesses that we interact with. And just so many great stories that she has shared about the journeys that her clients and have been on. And, the stories, we could easily put ourselves in any one of those stories. And so do go out to her website, entrepreneurdivyaparekh.com. If you're inclined, send her an email, contact her, connect with her on LinkedIn. And of course, do visit her book page on Amazon, the Amazon authors page, I should say, and we'll provide you the backlinks to that as well. All right, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day. Take care of yourselves, take care of your family, your loved ones, and be an impact in the community. Go out there and make a difference. We'll see you on the next episode of the Success Insight podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.